Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Coming Down to Earth with Spirit podcast with me, David Hale. Like with Season 1, we will continue talking about all things spiritual in a real and down-to-earth way. So I hope you can join me on my podcast journey so you can learn from my own spiritual journey and experiences with spirit in order to help you on your own spiritual journey and development. So join me now as we get into this episode. Hello everybody, I hope you're well. Thank you very much for tuning into the podcast again. And as you know, and I've said this before, the podcast is for you, it's for the listeners. It's about me sharing my knowledge with you to give you something to think about, to expand your knowledge. It's also here for those of you that are on your own journeys with mediumship and giving my honest and down-to-earth perspective, views and opinions on mediumship. You could also just be on a personal journey, and hopefully some of the topics that you've listened to throughout the podcast has helped you on that as well, or at least given you some kind of understanding or some inspiration or something else to think about to help you move forward. And this episode is no different. Now, to be honest, I've got to a point where I was a bit like, okay, what do I talk about? I'm kind of running out of ideas and out of questions. So please do keep your questions coming in, because actually all of the episodes that I've recorded from season 1 up until now have all been from your questions. So thank you to those of you that are listening who have sent me all those questions to turn into a podcast, because without them, there wouldn't be a podcast. So this episode is a suggestion from one of my students and loyal followers called Cheryl, and she suggested talking about things that maybe are not talked about so much. So what we mean is, whilst mediumship is exciting, especially when you first start developing, and at some points it can also be quite mind-blowing as well, what's not always discussed is the personal development and that we go through as developing mediums, the challenges that we go through when we're developing, and also sometimes the self-reflection that we don't do, but what we should do whilst we're developing. And when I say developing, it's not just 1 or 2 years. Now, as you grow as a medium, you're constantly developing, and you will hear that a lot. There are mediums that have been doing this for 20 years, and you'll hear them say, I'm still learning new things. And that's exactly, what I'm going through at the moment as well. I can feel my mediumship changing slightly. I receive information in different ways, in clearer ways. So, it's an ever evolving skill or ability, if you want to call it that. I don't call it a gift, I call it an ability. So hopefully this episode is going to help those of you who are on your mediumship journey, whether you're a year in, 2 years in, 5 years in. You might be like brand new to it, brand new to it. So hopefully this episode is going to help you, and even maybe just reassure you as well that, sometimes it is difficult, but we push through and we get through it, right? So let's start. And actually, let's start at the beginning of what I said a moment ago, is that mediumship can be exciting, is exciting, and sometimes it can be mind-blowing. And although I'm into my 7th year of mediumship, my mind is still blown sometimes. So some of the readings that I do, with the information that comes through, which is so out there, and there's no way on earth I could know these things, but people understand exactly what it is that I'm saying. So spirits still blow my mind with the information that comes through, and I'm still surprised, and I still know I'm sometimes shocked when something comes through, and I'm like, how did I get that? But I love the element of surprise, and hopefully that will continue throughout my journey, because it keeps you grounded. It keeps you kind of down to earth with it, and not taking the ability for granted, thinking, oh yes, I'm fabulous and I've got it, so I can, I'm always right. Because sometimes there is a chance that you're not always going to be right. So I still like that slight element of surprise when spirit gives me something that I think, how on earth? How on earth would I know that? Anyhow, let's talk about the challenges that we will go through as mediums. Now, this might not be the same for everybody, right? Because your personal development and your development as a medium is going to be different to other people, right? So this might sound quite generalistic, what I'm going to say, but hopefully some of you might be able to level with it and resonate with it and think, okay, it's not just me that's going through this thing then, it's other people that have been through, that are going through that. And I think a big part of developing as a medium, which Cheryl has rightly said in her suggestion, is the self-development part, and not the development as a medium, but the part of us that we need to develop, our personal selves. And you will hear a lot of mediums talk about the personal development, and that's really important that before you start getting into the mediumship, is that it's almost like I'm going to really simplify it here, but is that you're okay with you. Because this work as a medium, it carries a big responsibility, because we are going to be dealing with people who might be vulnerable, who may be in quite a depressed state. Their mental health may be affected by the grief that they're feeling, or the grief they're going through rather. So what we do as mediums is a huge responsibility, and therefore we need to make sure that we are in a good place ourselves in order to be that clear channel for spirit, in order to help those people that come to see us for the help in whatever form that is, right? And I've seen so many mediums online who suddenly disappear for months and months and months and months. And it turns out that most of the time it's because they're going through mental health issues themselves, whether it be depression or anxiety or whatever. And they suddenly disappear and they have to go and work on themselves, which is the right thing to do. But we should also always remember that we are also a human being. And sometimes that is a challenge in itself, because we want to constantly help people bring that healing to that particular person that's in front of you. But actually we also need to remember ourselves and remember that we have issues going on. We also go through grief. Just because we're a medium doesn't mean that we're not affected by our own loved ones passing. So we have stuff that we have to deal with as well. And I think I've talked about this in the previous issue, but the way the mediumship works, it's mind to mind communication. Spirit are communicating with us through the mind, right? We're not seeing dead people walk around necessarily. It's through the mind. So our mind needs to be clear. It needs to be in a good space. It needs to be working at a high vibration, for lack of a better phrase. We need to raise our vibration to connect to spirit, which means we are changing our mindset to a really positive place, to put it in a good space, ready for that communication to come through. So when we are feeling depressed ourselves, or our mental health is affected in some kind of way, that really affects your connection to spirits. And so we need to be able to work on that ourselves, and take care of ourselves before we can start helping other people. And I also think, you have to be in a good space in life in general, really, just my perspective here, in order to do this work as well. So if I talk about my own journey, I didn't start developing my mediumships until I was 35, and I'm nearly 41 now. It's not like I started developing when I was in my 20s or whatever else, right? And, I did ask spirit about that. And because throughout my life, from a teenager, say from about 15, 16 upwards, I went to see many psychics myself. I went to psychic fairs, and I went to see the late great mediums on stage, and those that are living as well. And they would tell me, you've got this ability, maybe you need to think about doing something about it. But I was a teenager. I was too busy, either doing my gymnastics, or I was out with my friends, or I was doing my dance classes, or whatever. My life just had a different plan for me. So my focus wasn't on developing as a psychic or medium, because I actually didn't think, although I was told it, I didn't think I was, because I thought you had to be born special to be a medium. I never thought of myself as special or talented or gifted, right? So my life journey took me on a different path. And when I got to my mid-20s, my late teens, I came out. obviously as a gay man, and life took me on a different path then. You know, I was too busy discovering who I was. I'd lived so many years pretending to be something that I wasn't, that I'd come out and I was finally able to be free. I was able to be myself. So I was discovering different parts about me, and that's what my life's path was at that point. And I don't think, looking back at that time, I would be able to do mediumship back then, because that's not where my mind was focused. I was focused on me and, you know, and developing me as a human being, right? And then when I got to my mid 20s, I joined a drag trio, and I became a drag queen in a drag. There's 3 of us, and we, you know, I also had a full-time job at the time as well, whilst touring with the drag group. So we would, you know, be up and down the country most weekends performing. We performed in Copenhagen in Denmark for about a year as well, about every 6 to 8 weeks for a year. So, and I did that for 12 years. So I was in the drag group for 12 years. So my life was still focused on other things. I still watched mediums online and all that kind of thing. Went to a couple of shows and whatever, but that's not where my mind was focused. Again, my life's path was discovering who I was, living life, meeting people I needed to meet, being on the stages I needed to be on, experiencing different things. I went through a bout of depression myself, and, you know, there were different deaths and, you know, different passings within the family as well. So I was just learning to be a person and just learning to be human, and just working on myself, my own insecurities, my own confidence issues and all that kind of thing. So again, when I look back, I think, you know, I wouldn't have been ready to develop as a medium at that point, but that was my best training to be a medium. Was life experience, because that's what we need in order, in my opinion. You need that life experience to be the best medium that you can be, because any medium that's listening to this will know that, you know, spirit will pull on our life experiences. They will pull on our frame of reference to give the best readings that we can give. If we've not lived a life or experienced certain things, then spirit don't necessarily have a lot to pull on, if that makes sense. So they'll always use that in order, in my readings anyway, to get certain messages, to get certain evidence across. And then I got to the age of 35, and if I look at that period of my life, things had settled down. I wasn't doing the drag stuff as much because we kind of semi-retired about 3 years before, and so my life was a bit more settled. You know, I knew who I was. I was 35. I was not a kid anymore. Do you know what I mean? And it was at that point that spirit had pushed me to start working on the mediumship. And look, I'm not saying by any means that I'm sorted, right? It doesn't mean that I'm perfect and my life's completely, you know, carefree. It's not, but I'm at a place where, you know, I am settled. I'm happy. I'm content with, you know, with the space that I'm in, with the person that I'm with, and all that kind of stuff, right? So 35 was that point where it was like, okay, now is the time to start developing. So my previous 35 years for me was almost like the lead up to developing as a medium. So I do feel, and you hear a lot of other mediums say this as well, is that, you know, self-development, working on yourself, knowing who you are, getting your shit sorted, basically, is going to be a benefit. It was going to add a benefit to your mediumship and to your spiritual connection, right? So that's what I would say for anyone listening is, I think what these days, and I think I'm the same as well, I've got to put my hands up here, is that I can be quite impatient. And when I first started developing as a medium, I wanted it to know everything about it like yesterday, and I want to know it now. And I was learning. And I think that happens even more today, because all the access that we have online to different things, people want to know things now, when actually you need to take a little step back sometimes and just allow it to flow in when it needs to flow in. You know, like the knowledge and the experiences, just let them flow on a natural rhythm rather than push. Because again, we need to be aware of of ourself, and be aware that we also need to develop within us as well, right? Now, this is not to say that you have to be, don't have to be completely sorted. I'm going to talk about self-development, because self-development is like mediumship, is an ever-evolving thing, right? I'm not saying you have to be like a perfect angel before you start developing as a medium, but it's just getting yourself into a good space. Basically, it's to acknowledge and get rid of those things that have held you back in your past or whatever, or those things in the past that still affect you today. Deal with them, own them, and then you can kind of put them to bed and move on, right? So self-development, I think, is really important in whatever form that is, right? Like I said at the beginning of this episode, it's not a one fits all, right? You have to find your ways of developing yourself, maybe going through some, what they say, cutting cords or whatever it is, I don't know. Dealing with some of those inner demons, again, for lack of a better phrase, right? And just sort yourself out before you can start sorting other people out, right? So you can be the best medium that you can be. Now, if we move on to challenges, because as Cheryl said when she suggested this episode, is not everyone talks about the challenges that we go through as mediums whilst we're developing. And I went through many, and I guess sometimes I still go through. We all go through challenges, right, with mediumship. Again, you can be doing this 20 years, and there are still challenges that we go through when we are working as mediums. I think if I talk about from my own perspective, confidence has probably been my biggest challenge, and being too hard on myself. And I think. And only because, as a person, I might come across as being super confident and whatever, but I'm not. Well, I'm more so now. Look, I'm 40, nearly 41, right? I ain't got time to be too shy and keep myself in the background. That was me as a kid. As a kid, I lacked confidence hugely. I wouldn't say boo to a goose, right? I've mentioned this before, but I was also an international. I was a national gymnast. I was a competitive gymnast as a kid, and Mum would remind me that before every competition I did, I would throw up because I'd get myself in such a state that that's how it ended up. I threw up outside the venue before I walked through the doors. Because it was just a confidence thing. I was never a confident child. I'm not, I think, my size as a child, I was very slim. I'm still slim now, but a bit more in shape, I hope. And all those kind of, self-esteem issues, I lacked, self-esteem hugely. I didn't look at myself as being particularly talented or whatever. I was never outspoken. And some of that has followed me through my life, but hey ho, that's where it goes. But if you link the confidence to the mediumship, it's having the confidence to trust, and the trust is another whole challenge in itself. But you have to trust what spirits are giving you, and that can be quite a difficult thing because with this whole mediumship thing, mediumship is, some would term it as, it's an experiment. It's experimental because whenever you have a client sat in front of you, or if you're stood in a platform or whatever, there's no guarantee that spirit are going to come through, right? Because you just don't know who is there. There tends to always be someone that does pop their head in, but this work is not guaranteed. So that can affect your confidence, because the last thing anyone wants to do is to be sat in front of a client and nothing ever comes through, or you're on a platform in front of 90 people and no spirit turn up. So, and that's always one of my fears as well, is that I'll do something like that and no one will ever turn up. But having said that, spirit have never let me down. But that's the challenge. It really is trusting spirit. Well, actually, it's not even trusting spirit, to be honest. And I questioned this a while ago as well, and I realized that spirit are not going to let me down. It's not that I don't trust spirit, it's that I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself that I was getting the right information. I didn't trust myself enough to know that that is spirit connecting. It's not my imagination, and all those kind of things. So we are as mediums that we are our biggest critics. We are the hardest on ourselves. Never mind the cynics and the skeptics out there. We are the hardest on ourselves. Well, from my perspective anyway, because I am quite hard on myself, because I had to learn also that there's no such thing as perfection with mediumship. And I'm saying that because I'm quite perfectionist by nature, right? So in my mind, when I first start developing, it's that I have to be perfect. I have to get everything 100% spot on. I have to do this, I have to say this, get that. And in reality, that's not the reality. You know, as I said, mediumship is experimental. You never know what is going to be said to you. You never know what's going to come through, who's going to come through, how many are going to come through when you're connecting to spirit. So one of the challenges for me definitely was to let go of the perfectionism and just allow it to flow in. And actually, it's taken me until about, I don't know, what month are we? August nearly. So in July, it took me till about 2 months ago to really relax into my mediumship, because even up until maybe 6 months ago, I would still get really very nervous before a one-to-one reading, because I sit there thinking, oh my God, what if nothing comes through? So rather than look at the positives and go, this is going to be a fabulous reading, I'm completely open, I'm inviting in spirit and putting a really positive thing on it, my mind, like most humans, would always go to the negative, thinking, what if this, what if that don't happen, what if if that's not said, what if that person don't come through, what if a person comes through that my client doesn't want to hear from? And you go through all those things in your head, but you have to learn to let them go, because you are just a channel for spirit. You are their voice. And I heard another medium say this: we have to be satisfied with what spirit give us, not what we want spirit to give us, because it's not up to us. If you've got a client sat in front of you and a spirit comes through who they don't want to, who they weren't expecting or didn't really want to communicate with, you kind of have to go tough. Well, not to the client, obviously, but you have to honor that spirit person coming through, because that spirit has come forward for a reason. They don't have a voice, a physical voice like we do. We are the voice for them. So if that spirit person comes through, we just have to learn to let go of the expectation that's put on us, and just from the client, and just give what we get. And that can be a challenging thing to do, because you really want that person from spirit to come through who that client really wants to hear from. Of course you want to do that, but that's just a challenging thing to do, is to let that go and just let it be what will be, right? Because again, we are just a voice for spirit. And so I think, as I said, confidence is a big challenge, because you have to have the confidence to trust enough that what's coming through is coming through. So again, in itself, trust is a whole other topic, but trust is the biggest thing that I've had to deal with. And again, it's not trusting spirit, it's trusting in myself to, that I know what's coming through is true and it's not just my imagination. And I think another challenge is we can sometimes lose the joy in mediumship. And that certainly happened with me. And I think the last episode that I did, I talked about the moments where I have felt like giving this work up, because I've taken the joy out of it. And the only place that's come from is the perfectionism and the expectations that you put on yourself, because you want to get things perfect. And when it doesn't go your way necessarily, the way in your head, how you've visualized it, then you think to yourself, well, maybe I'm not good enough then. Maybe I can't do it because it didn't go how I wanted it to go. And when you beat yourself up so much, the joy does come out of it. And you have to find a way, if you really want to do this and you're passionate about it, is finding the joy in it again. And that's a challenge in itself. And we go through cycles when we're developing. And when you first start developing, you are joyful about it because it's exciting, because you're connecting to spirit, you're getting all this information come in, the people that have come to see you, they can take everything you're saying, they're really happy with their reading, and you feel really excited, you feel really joyful, you think yes. Then what can happen is you lose the joy in it, because you constantly want new things to come in. You want new ways of spirit to communicate with you. You want to be even better. And when you don't feel like you're getting better, you get hard on yourself, and then you lose the passion in it and you lose the joy in it. And so there's always ups and downs with it. It's not always going to be plain sailing. And there's one thing that the late and great Mavis Patilla said, and I've watched many interviews with Mavis. You know, she's one of the pioneers for spiritualism. She's a great ambassador for spirit. And she says something which I was going through a phase where I was a bit like, I'm a bit up and down here with this. I don't know if I want to do it. Do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? Again, it's just that being hard on myself thing. And she said, with mediumship, we go through cycles. When you first start mediumship, it feels very natural. Then in the middle, it then starts to become, starts to feel unnatural. But then it does come back round again to feeling natural. And I thought, you know what, that is so true. Because as I've just said, when you first start developing and you first start getting those spirit contacts, it is exciting. So it feels natural. You know, you're enjoying it. It flows through. You're going with the flow. But then after a while, you want more. But when that more doesn't come when you want it to come, and you start questioning yourself, it then starts feeling unnatural because you feel like you're trying to pull for the information now. You're not getting what you want to get when you want to get it. And that's a big chunk of development. But it's a learning curve. You have to learn to go with the flow, trust the process. You know, mediumship it's a journey. It's not a 6-week course. It's not even a 2-year course. It's much longer than that. And you have to just go with the flow, go on the journey as it's meant to. But again, if you're impatient like myself, you don't want it to be a long journey, but sometimes that is just how it needs to be, so you can be the best medium that you can. And then, as Mavis said, it comes back around to feeling natural again. And that's the state that I'm in, actually. I've been through those phases. But yeah, I mentioned this in the previous podcast, but after I come back from holiday in May just gone, I'm on a different wavelength in my head. I'm more confident about what I'm doing. I am relaxing into my mediumship a lot more. I've now done 3 physical public demonstrations. So what I mean is actually being in a physical church or centre rather than being online doing Zoom things. I've actually been in physical spaces, like doing demonstrations, and I just found myself, although I was nervous, I found myself more relaxed into it because I've got more experience, and I don't beat myself up now if I get something slightly wrong. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong, right? It's just the way my mind has interpreted certain things. So you will go through those cycles again of it feels great, it feels happy, it feels natural. Then doesn't feel so great. This is not feeling very natural. I'm quite hard on myself. I'm losing my confidence. Background to natural again. Now, I've got to say, there's no time scales you can put on them because these cycles start and they finish when they're supposed to. But that can be hard to accept when you're in a more of a difficult space with it. But again, you have to trust that spirit know what they're doing with you. If you're meant to be on a certain path at a certain time, that's what you're meant to do. As I said, for me, for my platform, my public platform work, my physical platform work, it's taken me till 7 years to get there, right? But that's just how it's meant to be for me, because I've spent the previous number of years working on myself, developing the ability, doing one-to-ones, for different, number of different people, different types of people, but it all adds to where I am at this particular moment. And I had to go through those things to get to where I am now. And that's going to be the same for you guys. You're going to have to go through certain periods that are tougher than others to get you to the place where you are now, or where you will be. So know that you're not on your own, right? You are, you will go through these peaks and troughs and what have you. But yeah, you're always going to find, again, you'll be doing this 10 years, 20 years. There's always going to be moments where you beat yourself up and you think, oh, I could have done better there, or that didn't feel so good, or whatever, because the world changes, people change, life changes. So your mediumship is going to change with that as well, right? That's the natural thing that's going to have to happen. We can't stay the same. And then the other thing that can be quite difficult, the last thing I'm going to talk about, is the self-reflection. Now, self-reflection is a challenge in itself, and I don't do this enough either. But in life, we don't do this. I think the way life is, we're on such a hamster wheel that we just keep going and going and going and going, because we know we've got bills to pay, we've got kids to feed, and all this business. No, we don't stop and sit down and reflect and go, okay, what have I achieved? What have I been through that's led me to this moment? What skills have I obtained now? How has that changed for me? How has that changed? How is that now better? We don't do any of that. It might sound a bit corny, but with this work especially, and this was advice that I was given actually by another medium who did say to me, journal, write down at least once a month, at the end of each month, get your notepad and pen out, or your journal, and write down those things that you have learnt within that month, within your mediumship, whether it be from a reading that you've done or something you've experienced. Write it down month by month, or if you don't want to do that, do it quarter by quarter. So for these past 3 months, this is what I've learned through what I've experienced. Because then you can look back at your development and track your development and see where you started to where you are now, and you'll be able to see the changes that have occurred during your development. So that's one thing that I do, and I've done that ever since my very first development thing that I did. I can't remember what it was. From day one, I started diaries, and I still do it now. Whenever I do a reading now, I make a note of it in my diary, and that helps me. It helped me with my first book, especially because I can't look as mediums. We don't remember our readings, but I was able to go back through my journals and take certain excerpts from different readings I did to apply them to my first book, and I will do the same for the second book as well. So. And that makes you look at your development. It makes you look at where you've come from and to where you are now. But it's not an easy thing, because we don't always have time to sit down and go, all right, what should I look at today? What shall I reflect on today? But it does help. It does also help give you a little bit of a boost. So if you've done a really good reading with exceptional evidence, you can look back at that. If you're having a bit of a rubbish day, you can look back at your journal and go, okay, let's look at this reading that I did here. And that can also lift your spirits and give you a boost and give you that acknowledgement of you can do this. Even in those moments where you don't feel like you can, or, the next reading you did wasn't so good, you can still look back and go, well, actually, although that didn't feel so good to you, you can still do it, because look at this reading you did previously. So that's my suggestion, is to self-reflect when you can and acknowledge what it is that you've learned. How have your skills changed? Have you obtained new skills? For example, platform work. Being in front of people and public speaking is a skill in itself. Never mind giving a message from spirit, but being in front of people, which is not a comfortable thing for everybody. Just being there and having people look at you with expectation of reading, that's a skill in itself. To handle an audience of so many people, that's a skill, So there are many different things there to reflect on and to think about. So I hope that helps you. Actually, I hope that the whole episode has helped as well. At least it's given you something to think about. Hopefully some of you can resonate with this and know that you're not on your own, that we all do go through this. So you're not abnormal for experiencing what you're experiencing. It is just part of the process. And again, sometimes it's really hard to accept when you're going through it. But let spirit lead you down the path in which they feel, or they know, which is going to help you in the long run, right? Again, that can be very hard to trust that, especially when you want to get somewhere fast, right? But just, as someone said to me, sometimes you've got to pull the reins in a little bit, take your foot off the gas a little bit and just let it flow. Because if your spirit team want you to do this in the long term, they don't want you to burn out. They don't want you to just suddenly be out there and for 5 minutes and that's it. Because another medium said that to me once when I first started developing, and he said to me, take your foot off the gas a bit, because your spirit team don't want you to be a flash in the pan. They want you to be around for a long time doing this, not just be out there really quickly for 5 minutes and they don't see you again for the next 30 years. So just remember that as well. But I'm going to stop waffling on now, because I think I've talked enough in this episode. So once again, thank you very much for listening. Look after yourselves, and I'll speak to you all soon. Well, there you have it. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard and you found it interesting. There are plenty more episodes to come, so stay tuned, and I'll speak to you all soon.